I've said it before and I'll say it again. The elites in Ireland are desperate to turn this country into the next Sweden. The same political correctness and frequent use of euphemisms like diversity and inclusivity. We've got all that stuff going on, and mass immigration from the developing world taking place at breakneck speeds. The Irish people will be a minority in their own homes by 2050, according to a DCU professor, but that was based on 2005 immigration levels. Now the Irish government are planning to accelerate the population replacement with a new project called Ireland 2040. So recently the Irish government launched this new National Development Plan, which is comprised of 10 primary strategic outcomes. Areas like city development, increased investment in public transport, investment in housing and healthcare, significant infrastructure upgrades, environmental policies and more. The most eye-opening part of the proposal, besides the gargantuan cost of 116 billion euros of taxpayers' money that's apparently going to fund this thing, is the shocking increase in population size. Ireland is a small country of just 4.7 million people. Ireland 2040 plans to increase that population by an additional million people in just 22 years. No prizes for guessing where the vast majority of these new immigrants will be coming from. But it actually gets even better. Irish government paid press to promote plan to grow population by 1 million with mass migration. The Irish government has been slammed for paying journalists to write good news stories about Project Ireland 2040. Unveiled by the government last week with a commitment to spend 116 billion euros, the document outlines plans to boost the Irish nation's 4.7 million population by another million using mass migration. The government's Strategic Communications Unit paid for sponsored news pieces to appear in national and regional newspapers promoting Ireland 2040, which could not include negative or critical content, the Times reported on Friday. Wow, reminds me of Gamergate. Sometimes the suicide pill is a difficult one for the populace to swallow, so you have to soften them up to the idea with lies and propaganda. Speaking in the Irish Parliament, or Dáil, opposition leader Micheál Martin branded the government's use of the media to promote its scheme ethically dubious. Ethically dubious? Dude, the government using taxpayers' money to pay the mainstream progressive Irish media to lie to the public about a plan that will destroy the country as we know it. It's more than a little ethically dubious. It's downright tyrannical. The Taoiseach will say he's promoting the government, but the dogs on the street know he is using taxpayers' money to promote Fine Gael politically. Project Ireland 2040 has been slammed on social media as a pyramid scheme to enrich investors by adding consumers at taxpayers' expense and as a globalist program to replace the native population. Hashtag Ireland 2040 is nothing but a blueprint to the total demise of the Irish people, flooding the country with non-Irish immigrants, overwhelming the population. Where will these immigrants come from? The third world, not America, not Europe. This is replacement. They want us gone. Doubling the population of every city outside Dublin through mass immigration to drive up consumption and inflate housing costs to prop up a pyramid scheme economy is not an intelligent idea. It's going to wreck the nation and enrich only the landed gentry and those at the top. John Waters recently delivered a great speech on Irexit back at the start of this month. I'll include a link to where you can watch the full speech in the description box, where he said,
because the elites, or as I call them, the E-listers, who run us, have decided that the people are an inconvenience. If they had their way, they would have an election to elect a new people.
The government has also come under attack for plans to open a centre for 115 asylum seekers in a heritage town home to one of Ireland's oldest traditional festivals. Local media reports that on Friday, a public meeting called to discuss the plans was attended by more than 100 concerned locals, many of whom argued the town of just 300 residents lacks the services needed to cater for so many new arrivals. Mass migration from the third world has been a controversial topic in recent months, with reports that gangs of teenagers of African origin are terrorising locals across Dublin. The criminal youths are wreaking havoc throughout the capital, according to police, who say the offences range from shouting and intimidating old people in large groups to assaulting and robbing people of all ages, often with deadly weapons such as large knives. A source told the Irish Sun, "It's not just vulnerable OAPs suffering here. Innocent kids are afraid to go out and play." Gardaí had to respond to one incident in Swords where a 14-year-old boy was stripped down to his pants at knife point on the street just so they could rob him and ridicule him at the same time. That's what you're dealing with here. Opposition Fianna Fáil TD Jack Chambers said the behaviour of African gangs is a major problem that has left many of his constituents living in fear and scared to leave their homes. Putting the gang members' antisocial attitudes down to cultural differences, independent councillor Tony Murphy reported that police risk causing a mini riot any time they try to arrest one of the offenders. And it seems the Irish government wants more of the same for the next few decades because apparently they're desperate to catch up with other vibrantly enriched countries in Europe. They celebrate the native people becoming less numerous in their own lands. In the Ireland 2040 video, they do the usual, "we're a diverse and enriched country." The Swedish government did this too in a video, but because Sweden is a bit further down the multicultural road than Ireland, they were more heavy-handed about it. Native Swedes need to integrate into the new Sweden, and their video ends with a shot of a woman in a hijab, because that's where Sweden is going apparently. There's nothing that says progressive and virtuous more for these ideologues than celebrating the end of their culture and people, like in Germany for example.
Ich bin der Auffassung, dass wir in 20, 30 Jahren gar keine ethnischen Mehrheiten mehr haben in unserer Stadt. Das ist auch das, was Migrationsforscherinnen und Forscher sagen. Wir werden in einer Stadt leben, in der es einfach, dass unsere Stadt davon lebt, dass wir ganz viele verschiedene Ethnien haben, ganz viele Menschen, dass wir eine superkulturelle Gesellschaft haben, meine Damen und Herren. Was wir haben werden in der Zukunft, und ich sage Ihnen noch ganz deutlich, gerade hier in Richtung rechts, das ist gut so.
Like I said, Ireland is some ways away from that, but from the last census, there's already several areas of the country where people born outside of the country represent a higher percentage of the population there. Unlike the UK, France or Germany, for example, mass immigration into Ireland is relatively new. London, for example, is already less than 50% English now. Demographic changes are permanent, and unless Ireland rediscovers the notion of border control, the entire country looks to be headed for the same fate as London. We really have been sold out to the EU by our so-called leaders. Now, I'm not against the idea of some immigration, of course. It's going to happen through marriage or through filling skills shortages in certain highly technical areas of the jobs market. But it has to be sensible, controlled, limited, with careful vetting and an emphasis placed on compatibility of culture, language and values. The people coming to our countries should want to become European, or in the case of Ireland, they should want to become immersed in the dominant Irish culture. And this immigration should not come at the expense of the native people. And the citizenship of these new arrivals to our country should mean more to them than just a passport or a welfare check. Otherwise, we risk enduring the same ghettoization that's taking place in other EU nations. Multiculturalism and mass immigration are nation-ending policies. They're disastrous and unsustainable.